He was currently under diagnosis for PTSD, but he had not yet been diagnosed for PTSD. He was undergoing behavioral health and psychiatric treatment for depression and anxiety and a variety of other psychological and psychiatric issues.
The American military continues to struggle with how to handle troubled veterans like the one who turned a gun on others before committing suicide at Fort Hood.
A former Army helicopter pilot, Elizabeth McCormick, helps fellow veterans return to civilian life. In her role with the organization Grace After Fire, it had to have been heartbreaking when you heard the news yet again that something had happened at Fort Hood. Are we taking care of our soldiers? I think that's the big question. Are we taking care of our military?
You know, we're in harm's way and we think we're safe when we're at home, and to have something like this is heart-wrenching.
Yeah, when they're on their home base, you would think that should be the most secure place possible.
It absolutely should be.
Mm-hmm.
That's the place where you come back to recover after deployment from whatever you went through, and also to prepare for the next deployment, ideally. So that is supposed to be a safe place.
It absolutely should be. More should be done to make sure it's a safe place.
The question I have, though, is that this individual, there are signs, as we just heard from the general, that this was a troubled individual, and that may or may not have had anything to do with his combat experience. Is it possible that they took in a guy who should never have been accepted into the U.S. Army?
It is absolutely possible.
Did you see that when you were in the Army?
Oh, we saw people that shouldn't be in, that were overly aggressive, that had potentially psychiatric issues that were brought in. I mean, what is the vetting process that goes on to come into the military? Are they background checked? Are they checked other than a cursory physical or evaluation?
Mm-hmm. So you think this needs to start from the get-go, before maybe they're even led into the military, to see if there are any issues beforehand?
I think that's a potential solution to a root cause.
How long does it take? They said that he was diagnosed with anxiety and depression, and that they were in the process of diagnosing him for post-traumatic stress disorder. How long is that process? And if you have anxiety and depression, I mean, isn't that kind of a step in that direction?
You know, the process is so cumbersome and it's so long, and they don't want to label someone right away. You know, but the fact of the matter is, if they're showing any signs of anxiety, depression, you know, overstimulation, things that could be precursors to being diagnosed to post-traumatic stress, they've got to do something.
Right, and the question is, do you keep that individual in where you basically have a chain on them and say, okay, you've got to do this, you've got to show up and talk to the shrink, you've got to take your medication, or do you turn them loose back into society and say, we just don't want to have to deal with this kind of trouble?
It's kind of scary, isn't it?
Yeah,
because
that's a tough choice.
It really is. You know, to just say, okay, you know, just go through VA. Well, we all know the overburden at VA and the process with the VA is. So, you know, what's the other solution?
And these are people that have served the country, so at the same time you want to give them the respect that they deserve, especially if they're dealing with something that you know, happened to them while they were serving the country.
Absolutely. So it's a tough call. Is the military, you know, doing enough? Could they do more evaluations before they let someone out to make sure that they're not going to be of harm to themselves, to others, to society, to the country? It really needs to be reevaluated.
Do you find it a little bit odd, and people who favor, you know, concealed handgun licenses are going to say, why are they not allowed on an Army post? Why do you have to wait for the police to get there, and there's time enough to, in Nidal Hassan's case, kill 13 people, in this case, wound about 20 people, before the police can get there? Why isn't somebody authorized to carry a weapon?
Well, we have our own weapons on the base, and they're tightly controlled to hopefully prevent a situation like this occurring. We have to go through an armory and sign our weapons out, and their serial number assigned, and there's a pretty strict process with weapons on a base.
Didn't work too well this time or the last time.
It really hasn't.
No, yeah, he hadn't registered his weapon, but he recently purchased it, and even though, you know, he hadn't been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, he still had anxiety and depression, but it's a tough call.
It's scary. So with Grace After Fire, where I'm on the board, you know, we try to help veterans get the help where services can sometimes fail.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and thanks for your service on that board as well.
Appreciate it.